All right, Shalom. As always, all praises, honor, and glory goes to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rukah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and salutations to the elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Lord willing, this one will be edifying to the elect. And it will be on a very hot topic for these Christians, the Gentiles, right? This is a topic that brothers have been going into, sharpening their swords, getting sharp on these, you know, topics that, at this point in the game, it should be simple to us. However, Christians have the Spirit is not dealing with them. The Lord is not dealing with these Christians. They don't understand what the scriptures actually says. For the most part, they don't understand how to break down the scriptures properly, go into words, and being hopeful, men of the Lord. We are supposed to know how to do these things. We're supposed to be that light, for the elect to see, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemashah, of course, to actually wake up to the truth, of what the Bible is saying. As we all, when we got our call into this truth, it was maybe through the brothers on the highways and byways, physically seeing them or seeing them online, on the Urim and the Thummim. Anyways, it's not, you don't really have to go into many scriptures to prove this, but Lord willing, I'll get the chance to read a few. So this is Romans chapter 9, and what I'm referring to is that the Gentiles, the act of Gentiles in the scriptures are actually referring to Israelites. Contrary to popular Christian beliefs, the Bible is actually speaking about Israelites that lost their way. That were because there has been many different transitions that led up to this, right? But let's keep it simple. And this is Romans chapter 9, verse 24. And it says, even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. And Christians hear Gentiles and they, see, not only the Jews. But the first thing that I'm going to do is going to the word Gentiles in this chapter, right? And the word is ethnos.
Strong's G 1484. Ethnos. Ethnos.
In general, the word Gentile means a nation, right? Israel is a nation itself. Moabites, the Chinese, they're a nation. Edomites, the so-called white people, Caucasians, they're a nation, right? But this is specifically talking about, let me read some of the examples. A multitude, whether of men or beasts, associated or living together, a company, troops from a multitude of individuals of the same nature, a genus, the human family, right? And this is what it is here: a tribe, a nation, people group. A tribe, a nation, people group, right? So it's referring to the tribes, the different tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes, right? That's what it's referring to in this chapter, right? Why did it say not only of the Jews and the Gentiles? Because the Jews knew that they were Israelites. You had some of our people that grew up believing that they were just Greeks. Although you had Greek-speaking Jews, which were called Grecians, they knew. Likewise, you had other Israelites growing up believing that they're Ethiopian. Just like today, we grew up, some of us grew up believing that we're Jamaicans, we're African Americans, we're Nigerians, we're Dutch, we're German, because Israel is scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. We believe that we're all these different things that we're not, because that's how we were brought up, But through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai, men and women have been waking up for decades, coming back to the truth of who they actually are. But these things, there's nothing new under the sun. This is something that has always been, right? So when we go back, continuing, just to prove, and it says, as he saith also in OC, and this is referring to Hosea chapter 1, because OC, the word OC means salvation, Hosea, right? It's referring to a specific verse, right? That when I'll read it. So it says, "As he saith also in OC, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not beloved." Israel is always the Most High's people. What happened was we went off. We were cut off for a time, right? As a punishment, as a correction, you know, for the backsliding behavior, worshiping other gods, and so on and so forth, right? And it says, "And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God." Right. So how do we know this? It's speaking about Israel just to further prove it, because you're gonna have some slick Christians saying, but it still said Gentiles. I just explained to you that the Gentiles are referring to Israelites that are in a heathenistic mindset. Israelites that grew up thinking that they're not, believing that they're not Israelites because of the different captivities. When you read in the book of Maccabees, Israelites weren't, let me just get it real quick. And then I'll come back to this. We weren't allowed to, keep our customs, and that's the spirit. I already had it here because we were going into, some of these things a few days ago, the brothers. Nah, I can't do it like this. Let me see what's up. Bear with me. Oh, my bad. Actually, I'm looking for First Maccabees chapter 1, right? And it says, and this reads, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 10, it says, "And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus, the king who had been an hostage at Rome. He reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen," right? The other nations. Right, because Israel, we were created to be separate and holy. That's the difference. We were not created to have a mind like the other Gentiles, right? The other which are the other nations. We are a separate people, a holy people above them, right? So covenant with the heathen and that are around about us, for since we departed from them, we have much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischiefs. So just think about that, and think about the generations that were growing up in that time, not following the customs, not keeping the commandments and the statutes and the ways of our culture, or Israelite culture. That's how easy it is. You just pat one generation doesn't follow the way, then it continues and it gets worse and worse, and then you fall away, and then you start believing that you're actually Greeks, you're actually Romans, you're actually Egyptians, and so on and so forth. Let me continue a bit. It says, "Now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion over two realms." And that's pretty much a point, man. It's made itself, So you had Israelites going off into other, doctrines and beliefs, not not following after the ways of Yahweh Shemiel Shai. Plain and simple. So it's referring to those individuals, right? So let me go back to Hosea. So this is Hosea chapter 1 and verse 8. And it says, now when she had weaned Laruhama, Salakia, she conceived and bare a son. Then Yahweh called his name Lo Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your power. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered, nor measured, nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that this is what Romans was referring to, that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living power. And that's what we're seeing today with the Hebrew Israelites awakening, right? So we were, let me get this. I think it's in bear with me here. What verse is it? I think it's Jeremiah chapter 22. Let me see what verse. Bear with me here. Sometimes I'll be blind. Strange vine. Oh, it's 2 and 21. Right. So this is just to support the point, of us being holy and separate as a nation, the nation of Israel. We went off, going back to the curses, and the curses also have a part to play in us, forgetting who we are. It's a very long process, very simple to understand that the Spirit is dealing with you. So this is Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 21, and it says, yet I had planted thee a noble vine, holy a right seed. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? So Israel became strange unto the Most High, right? And they turned, away. But for thou wash thee with nature and take thee much soap, yet thine iniquity is marked before me, saith Yahweh. Right? How canst thou say I'm not polluting, and I have gone after Baalim? See thy way in the valley, know what thou hast done. Thou art a swift and dromedary, traversing her ways. Right, so that's the point. Israel was corrected, cast off for a time, for the wickedness, man. And turned into a strange vine, a stranger. That's why the scriptures also refer to strangers, or other. We use the word other, referring to the Israelites that became like the nations, learned the way of the heathen, and started to follow after those ways. So when you're going to chapters such as John chapter 7 verse 35, when the Jews speak to Yahweh Shai saying, and this is John chapter 7 verse 35, and it says, then said the Jews amongst themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed amongst the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? So this is the point that I was making. Israel was dispersed and scattered, throughout the whole earth, as Gentiles themselves, being becoming Gentiles, having that way of thinking, that they're Greeks, they're Egyptians, they're Romans. Just like Cornelius. Cornelius grew up believing that he was an Italian, he was a Roman, but in fact he was a Israelite, right? So this is very plain, man. Salakia. So I had a next one. This is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11. It says, "Wherefore remember that ye being time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh, made by hands." So even just not following those days, not following the basic customs of circumcision, which was was a big custom of for an Israelite man, for an Israelite boy, for an Israelite male. You were already going in the path of a Gentile, right? Does that mean that those individuals were not Israelites? No, right? But in their flesh, even in their flesh, in how they're carrying themselves, even in their attire, they were dressing like Romans, dressing like Greeks, you know, moving like a different nation. Not following the customs, not following the dietary laws, not, all of these things are in the book of Maccabees as well. In the Apocrypha, when these wicked kings used to force our people to go off, or create laws where we couldn't keep the Sabbath day, or bribe certain elders not to, to show an example of them eating pork, to influence the other generations into going off. So these are the circumstances our people are coming from, believing that we were these other nations, from generations upon generations. So that's what it's referring to when it says the Gentiles, also the Gentiles, the Israelites that became Gentiles. And where does it say that? It says 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, and it says, "Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led." Right? So when you come to the understanding that you were actually Israelites, and the Gentiles that it's referring to are Israelites that just didn't know or have no clue about the truth or who they actually are because of circumstances, right? Because of the curses, because of the prophecies. You can then relate these scriptures and see plainly, because these things are plain to the righteous. Verse 3 says, "Wherefore I give you to understand that no man speaking by the Spirit of God calleth Yahushua accursed, that no man can say that Yahushua is Lord, but by the Holy Spirit," right? So you won't be able to understand these simple things if the Spirit of truth, which is the Holy Spirit, is not dealing with you. So again, going back to Romans chapter 9, there's more precepts that you can read, to show, Israelites that were actually being called other nations, But the point was already made, man. Again, Romans chapter 9, verse 24, "Even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles." So now we understand that the Gentiles are referring to Israelites that, lost their way. Israelite foreigners, Israelites that grew up believing that they were Greeks, Romans, just like today, calling ourselves different things that we're not, right? So it's referring to Israelites that were following other nations, other idols, other gods. Simply put, those are the Gentiles that it's referring to. As it says, "As he saith also in OC, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not my beloved." And Paul even says it. I don't know where in Romans specifically it is, but I know it's here. So this is Romans 11, right? I should know that. This is Romans 11, verse 1 and verse 2. And it says, God hath not cast away his people, which, nah, that's not where I want it. Oh, my bad, my bad. It was Romans chapter. Let me start at verse 1. I don't know why I'm just reading it. I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Because when it says that Israel was cut off, the Lord didn't cast Israel away permanently. I know I said it earlier, but I also said that for a time. So Israel was just cut off for a time, you know, for a season, but we were never actually cast away, because we belong to Yahweh Shem Shai. He punishes Israel, his people, how he punishes them and how he chooses to punish them. So even some of those words, it's really the words, right? The words sound a certain way, but it's nothing. It was never anything permanent, right? So God did not cast away his people. He has always only been dealing with the Israelites. No other nation can receive of the promises. The promises are only made to the Israelites. Now, this is not a color thing. It doesn't matter what color you are, because Israel looks like every nation under the sun. You're gonna have Israelites looking like Jackie Chan. You're gonna have Israelites looking like Saddam Hussein. You're gonna have Israelites looking like Wesley Snipes and LeBron James, right? You're gonna have Israelites looking in all different people, all different flavors, man. Because we're scattered. We've been mingled among all of these nations, procreating with these nations. But the seed of a man cannot be changed, no matter how much he's mingled, right? So if your father or your ancestors or the men are Israelites, then you're gonna be Israelites, no matter how you may turn out to be. You're gonna have men that like Asian women and they sleep with Asian women, and their generations follow. The men in their generations follow that same trend, because that's where the Lord had them, located on the earth. It's very simple. It only takes a couple Jakes to be in the land of in the land of Asia to mingle the seed and get so-called lost, in the translation of faces, looking at the different faces of men, saying, oh, that's a Chinese person, that's a black man, because you have so-called Edomites that are actually dark skinned, because they did the same thing as well. They mingled their seeds among Canaanite women, Hamite women, and even Israelite women, man, which is completely off, because an Israelite woman should not lay with an Edomite man. However, how do you judge this? You judge these things through the spirit. Your spirit is gonna bear witness with the truth. But the whole point of this video was to just, clarify further, that the word Gentiles in the scriptures is not referring to other nations, in the context of what these Christians bring out. It's always referring to Israelites in a Gentile state of mind, in a state of mind that they're not Israelites, that they're Romans, they're Greeks. Again, like today, they're Bayesians, they're German, they're Italian, everything else but Israel. But being an Israelite is a ethnicity, right? It is a lineage. It's not a religion. The Bible is a history book for these people, for these Israelites. That's why the Bible is so pro-Israel, pro-Yasharallah, right? That's why these small hats, these the small hats, these the juices, they want to be us, because they know the secrets. In order to tell a lie and tell it well, tell it good, you have to know the truth. So that's why their lie is so successful. That's why you Christians are so bugged out, because you never go after them, because they already they already succeeded in convincing you that they're the people, that now you just settle to say, well, all nations can make it. It's not of the Jews only, it's of the Gentiles. Well, I'm here to tell you it is of the true, you know, Jews, you know, the true Israelites is on. That's who salvation only belongs to. If you're Israelite and you look like a Asian, you look like a Caucasian, you will be delivered if you're of the elect. It doesn't matter what you look like. It matters what you go back to, who your forefathers are. So you could look like a so-called white person. You could look like a so-called African person. You know, you could look like a so-called East Indian. You know, you could look like anything, as long as your lineage goes back to Israel, then you're gonna be Israel, right? You can't make yourself an Israelite or spiritual Israelite or anything of the sort. So that's all I have on that. Lord willing, you know, this was an edifying lesson to the elect. And as always, all praises, honor, and glory goes to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rukar Kodash Shalom.